Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we're joined by the CEO of Onboard Legal and the Amazon bestselling author, Richard Brock. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matthew. Very glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by cyberlynx.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and a hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLynx intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker successfully bypassed your security. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlynx.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Richard, I got to tell you, loved your book. Let's see if we can get that focused in. Win the Talent Game. That wasn't focused at all. But in any event, fantastic book. Can you tell us what was the inspiration here?
Yeah, thank you. It was I really enjoyed the process of writing that book. It was it took a little longer than I expected it to, which I guess most things are like that. But I really did enjoy it. Candidly, I've always wanted to write a book. It's just something that I've sort of always had as a lifelong goal. And a few years ago, I came to the realization that I was not getting any younger. That sort of finally dawned on me. And I've been in the industry. I'm a lawyer by background, and I've been in the legal recruiting industry for over 20 years. So I feel like I've got a pretty good knowledge base about the industry. And candidly, one day I just started writing. I mean, I just started writing it, and then I wrote for 45 minutes or something, and then I did the same thing the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and then it kind of started to take shape. So it wasn't any particular incident that motivated me to start writing it that day, other than just that vague desire in the back of my head of, one day I'd really like to write a book. And for whatever reason, one day a few years ago, I just started writing it.
That's great. Now, I mean, I understand when you get the Stephen King types who they've got this crazy process, this crazy imagination. I think that's a different story, but I think when you've got a subject matter expert, you've spent years in the business, you live it, you breathe it, you have this wealth of knowledge that that you're sharing constantly with new clients, with people all the time. I think it's kind of a natural, thing to write a book about it and be like, hey, look, let me just put all this down. I'm telling people all the time, why not put this into a book? It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And it was, as much as anything, writing that book was a way for me to organize a lot of those thoughts, because you're right. It would be a conversation here. Maybe I'd do a white paper there, or advise a client on a certain issue over there. And then writing the book was really a way for me to synthesize all that, organize it, and put it into what I hope is a digestible format.
Well, I certainly think it is. I thought it was great, not being in the legal community. I run an IT and cybersecurity company. We have a lot of law firms that we help with the IT and secure on the cybersecurity side. And I think, being familiar with the law firms, you touch on so many, I don't say touch on, you really go into kind of the heart and soul of what's needed to kind of grow your business and keep it from dying. And it really does come down to talent. You talk about this in the book. I mean, basically the whole point, right, is talent acquisition. So, for people who aren't really, let's say the law firm that is, I don't know, let's say they've got 5, 10, 15 lawyers. They're very happy and comfortable. What do you say to them about talent and why it even matters? Because they're comfortable with their 5, 10, 15 people.
Sure, sure. So a couple of thoughts. One thing I want to mention before I answer your question is this. I mean, even though my book is for the legal industry, it's about the legal industry. It's really intended to address law firms and individual attorneys who are exploring career options. I think many of the principles are applicable to almost any industry. I mean, any industry where people, entities are looking to acquire high-end talent. I think a lot of the principles in the book should be beneficial to them, because I think the principles of talent acquisition are really the same regardless of industry. So to answer your question, you got a person who has a managing partner of a 10 to 15 lawyer firm. And what would I tell them about sort of growth strategies? The thing about it is this, I'm definitely not saying, and I mentioned this in the book, I'm not saying at all that bigger is always better, because that's not the case. There are countless highly successful small firms out there of, from 1 lawyer, 10 lawyers, 15 lawyers. And there is zero wrong with that. And there's a lot that's right about that. Those firms have a lot of advantages. But one point that I really do try to make, and I think this is universally applicable inside the legal industry, outside the legal industry. It's almost impossible for businesses to stay the same size, to maintain the status quo for any lengthy period of time. I mean, a business can do that for a few years, but at some point something's going to happen. We'll just use we'll use a law firm as an example, because that's who the book was really written for. Say you've got that 15 lawyer law firm. They're happy. They like what they have. So, hey, Richard, why should we change that? Why should we, try to add talent? And the short answer is, you don't have to, but understand what is likely to happen. What is likely to happen at some point, of course, all of your partners, including you, are getting older. At some point, some of those partners are going to start to retire. What if you lose a major client, which happens? In a 15 lawyer firm, you lose a client who's responsible for 15% of your revenue. That's a big hit. What if one of your partners leaves? One of your partners gets recruited away for a different opportunity. People die. What if that happens to one of your partners? I mean, there's so many things that could happen, and all of a sudden your revenue goes down 20%, 25%. You've got a major problem. What I always encourage law firms to do is to sort of take look down the road, not 12 months, but 12 years. What do you want things to look like? Always sort of keep the succession in mind, because that influx of fresh blood is really what's going to keep your law firm alive. I mean, there are so many law firms that 15, 20 years ago were absolute powerhouses, but they didn't really grow. They didn't really add talent. They didn't inject fresh blood into the firm. And now a lot of those firms have either vanished, or they're considerably weakened, and they're really a shell of their former selves.
Yeah. Well, I think the struggle for a lot of business owners, law firms and otherwise, is how do you even go about it? You are so busy in the day-to-day operations of your business. Everybody's busy. They're doing, just keeping up with the status quo. How do you even go, unless you happen to bump into a very talented lawyer who is looking to change firms? How do you even go about it?
Sure. So most firms, most law firms, what they are looking for, the type of lawyer that they're looking for primarily, I mean, sometimes they want worker bees, service lawyers, but primarily they want partners who have clients, who have a book of business. So they're revenue generators right off the bat. So that's kind of, as far as the target, that's what most of our clients and what I think most law firms are looking for. But as far as the actual, sort of nuts and bolts of how you go about it, first and foremost, you have to make it a priority, right? I mean, growth, you have to have a plan for it, and you have to put the time into it, and you have to prioritize it. I mean, growth is not going to just happen. Yeah, occasionally you will run into the big, the partner who's got a big book of business, and you happen to catch him or her on the right day, and they happen to be, looking for other options. Yeah, that happens. but that's sort of blind luck. I mean, that's sort of just this side of playing the lottery. I mean, yeah, you might win it, but odds are you're probably not going to. So, what we advise firms to do is, look, if you have the resources to dedicate a significant amount of time by somebody who knows how to sell the firm and who's willing to get out there and hustle and look for and try to recruit this talent, then do that. If you don't, then, at the risk of sounding self-serving, that's the business that we're in. Okay. I mean, the legal recruiting industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there's a reason for that. That is the reason that companies that are in my space, in the legal recruiting space, there's a reason that we exist, because it is time consuming and it's not easy. But when you land that person, when you land that partner who has a $2 million book or whatever the number is, I mean, that can have a significant impact on your law firm.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. How else do you go about it? I mean, there aren't a lot of industries like lawyers where the talent is the product, right?
Right.
So in most cases, there's a widget or a service that it's not so talent, dependent. Whereas law firms, it's 100% about the talent.
There's no question about it. And you're exactly right. That really is a unique aspect of the legal industry, for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, of course, the lawyers, they are the revenue generators, right? I mean, they are the economic engine of the enterprise. Is the lawyers, typically billing hours, sometimes flat fee, but billing hours, generating revenue. And two, that's really law firms have tried to diversify a little bit, offering consulting services and things like that. But generally speaking, that's the service that law firms offer. Law firms are not going to start selling widgets. They're not going to start providing healthcare services. Law firms, they are in the business of providing, legal services to their clients, and that's how they make money. So if these firms want to grow, and I would submit that all firms need to be at least considering growing, if not actively pursuing it, for the reasons I touched on earlier, the only way they're going to grow is by adding more lawyers to their firm, preferably lawyers who are revenue generators from the outset, unless firms are in the fortunate position of having an excess amount of work, and then they need service partners. Now, I know, sorry, I'll say one more thing. I do know law firms, many of them actively recruit, law students, recent law graduates, and I'm a big proponent of that. It keeps your firm young, keeps your firm relevant to the younger generation, but that's like a 10-year growth plan. I mean, because it's going to take 2 years before those folks are even profitable, probably 6 to 8 years before they really know what they're doing. So that's an important, we call that organic growth. That organic growth is important, but it's really not a viable growth strategy in and of itself, just because it takes so long.
Well, it's also really expensive, right? I mean, you're investing a lot into them. They have zero book of business coming into it. They've got, and hopefully, they're going to be, let's say, marketable enough and able to build up that book of business without it being an added burden on the law firm to, hey, look, we've got to bring in clients for this for this new attorney and kind of build up their book of business. So I kind of see this lateral hiring as much like when you hire a good salesperson. They pay for themselves. It doesn't matter what their price is. The process of and the acquisition of good talent pays for itself. It's really a no-brainer. So I'm curious as to your, like the specifics on this. If I'm managing director of a law firm, and is it really just simple math that it doesn't matter what it's going to cost me to get this, let's say a very talented attorney with a $2 million book of business, it pays for itself. Right. I mean, so it's why wouldn't you? I mean, it doesn't make sense not to.
Yeah. So you're right. The flip side of that argument would be a couple couple of things that I think are relevant. First and foremost, because of the nature of how lawyers work and frequently collaborate, somebody's got to be a good cultural fit.
Yeah.
I've worked with plenty of attorneys who had a great practice, great book of business, but nobody wanted to hire them because, frankly, they weren't very pleasant to be around. Right. They were troublemakers, they were arrogant, whatever negative personal characteristic they had. So the cultural fit is really, really important. Secondly, there has to be some compatibility with practice areas, with bill rates, with a sort of a meeting of the minds as far as compensation structures, things like that. So there really is sort of a culture and compatibility aspect to it as well. But I mean, generally speaking, and again, obviously assuming someone, doesn't have a bad reputation, they haven't had bar discipline issues, things like that, so assuming we're talking about somebody who is an ethical attorney with a good reputation, B, he or she is a cultural fit with the firm, then, three, if the numbers line up, if the book of business is there, if the rates are there, if the comp is not going to cause problems, then yeah, it is almost a no-brainer. You said something earlier that I thought was interesting when you said, I'm paraphrasing, but you said, it's sort of like hiring a good salesperson.
Yeah.
And the reason that caught my ear, I actually touch on this in the book. Lawyers, they really hate to think of themselves as salespeople. I mean, they really, really do. But I have long maintained that not only lawyers, but everyone is in sales. Whether they want to be or not, whether they think they are or not, they're in sales. And that absolutely applies to attorneys. Because I mean, I've seen it countless times when firms get in trouble, the economy dips or whatever happens, and the firm they start slashing salaries or even laying off people. I promise you, it's not the rainmakers who are having their salaries cut or who are being shown the door or who are losing their equity points or whatever. Those things are happening so that the firms can continue to reward the rainmakers. And another word for rainmakers would be salesperson.
That's right.
Yeah.
100%. Now, and so you touched on kind of ethics, and with the lawyer, but are there ethical considerations in terms of lateral hiring?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, there's a couple of chapters in my book that are devoted exclusively to that issue, to the ethical considerations that are involved in a lateral hiring process. And what's been kind of interesting to me is a lot of firms really are not aware of them. I think more and more as lateral hiring continues to become more and more prevalent, I think firms are learning more about it. But there are absolutely ethical guidelines that law firms and lateral attorneys, who are moving from firm A to firm B, they absolutely have to follow those ethical guidelines, or they can find themselves, in a spot they don't want to be in.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine, just culturally, when you rewind, 30, 40 years, people used to stay, just in all industries, used to stay kind of put. Once you got a good job, you stayed there as long as the company was there. And this hopping from job to job is a very much a modern, I don't know, thing. It is not something that was acceptable 30 years ago at all. If you were, obviously there was something wrong with you. If you couldn't hold down a job, couldn't stay at one place, that was a red flag. So today, where it becomes where it is far more accepted and almost expected that, good talent is going to move around, to some degree. I would imagine that makes the entire process of, finding somebody who can find that talent very important.
Yeah, no, and Matthew, you're exactly right. I mean, my industry really didn't exist or barely existed, as recently as the 1980s. I mean, there might have been a handful of people who were in the legal recruiting space, in, say New York, LA, and Chicago. But beyond that, it just didn't exist because of what you just said. People started with a firm straight out of law school. They were an associate for 7 years. Then if they were doing a good job, they became a partner, and they remained a partner in that law firm until they retired. And that was a few people would become judges, a few people may go in-house, but that was the career path for probably 95% of the industry. And that really started changing. It started changing, sort of on a broad base, really in the 90s. And then by the time, you get into the 2000s and the 2010s, it's shifted to where it's almost like if you haven't made at least one or two lateral moves, the people start to wonder if something's wrong with you. Like, well, why not? And look, firms don't necessarily like that, which I understand. Turnover is expensive. Nobody likes to lose good people. But, for one thing, firms are also very happy to take on a talented lateral with a good book of business coming from another firm, and two, when there have been, pretty severe economic hits like the Great Recession, 08, 09, a lot of lawyers lost their jobs. So it's a two-way street, right? I mean, it's really hard to have one without the other. But it is, and again, I think that's reflective of the entire economy. I don't think there's anything in that regard. I don't think there's anything unique about the legal industry. I think that's just the life in our society in the 21st century. That's just people are generally free agents. I mentioned that in the book. I think that, one of the best pieces of career advice I could give to any lawyer, whether he or she is, in their third year out of law school or 30 years of experience or anything in between, you really should view yourself as a free agent. I'm not saying the grass is always greener, because it's not always greener, but sometimes it is. And, if you are not driving your career path, nobody's going to drive it for you. I mean, you have to take charge of your own career and steer it in the directions you want it to go.
Yeah. No, 100%. Well, you know what? We've talked a little bit about the book, which was great, but I'd like to talk a little bit about Onboard Legal. So run me through this. How does it work? What's your ideal, client look like? What's the elevator pitch, if you will?
Sure. So the way we operate Onboard Legal, our business model is actually fairly unique for our business. The way the legal search business typically works, and I had a company in the 2000s that operated like this, so I'm very familiar with this model. And there's nothing wrong with this model. We just happen to have a different model with Onboard Legal. But the traditional model is this: it's candidate focused. And by that, I mean, the search firm will go out, they will find that attorney who's got, say, a commercial real estate lawyer with $1 million book of business, okay? Or a litigation associate, whatever it is they're looking for. And if it's a good marketable candidate, the search firm will get that candidate, and they will market that candidate to 4, 5, 6 different law firms that they think will be interested. And then the legal search firm, they work the process, but at the end of the day, they don't particularly care who hires that person, as long as someone hires the person. If someone hires the person, they're going to get a fee, and they're going to be happy. Now, the firm who ends up with that talent is going to be happy. The other 4 or 5 firms are not going to be very happy. But that has always been, generally speaking, that's always been the way the industry works. Well, when I started Onboard Legal about 8 years ago, we started thinking, the one party that works for the least are the ones who are paying the freight. The law firm clients, they're the ones who are paying, and they're really getting the shortest straw in this whole scenario. So we wanted to create a model that we call it client side legal recruiting. And what we do for our clients is they are our actual clients. And by that, I mean, they give us their priorities and we go out, we don't just look for whatever we can find, sort of lowest hanging fruit. What we look for is exactly what they want. If they want a commercial real estate lawyer in Los Angeles, that is what we go out and find. What a lot of legal search firms do, and again, I'm not knocking this, there's nothing wrong with it, but if they get a search request for, hey, go find commercial real estate lawyers in Los Angeles, well, if what they happen to have or what they can easily acquire is a litigator in San Diego, they're going to present the litigator in San Diego because it's easier. It's lower hanging fruit. We don't do that. We work on exactly what our clients want us to, and we work for them, so that they don't have, those negative scenarios where they thought they had talent that they'd really been looking for, only to lose that person in a bidding war. So the way it's the way we've structured our business model is relatively unique in the industry.
I love that. I mean, I think you're 100% right, and I think that is a much more accurate approach. It is, it's focused on the right party, right?
Yeah.
And it creates a better solution all around versus the crazy free for all. Just kind of, look, you you find all the talent, and now you find them a place. Okay. But I think you're right. I think that the industry was going about that the wrong way, and that's brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
So then how's that work in terms of engagement? Is it something where it's purely a kind of a finder's fee? Like when you place the talent, then you've made money. If you do nothing, if you place nothing, you get nothing, or how's that work?
Yeah, no, good question. Traditionally, our industry has worked on a contingency basis, right? If you find the attorney, place the attorney with firm A is going to pay you a fee. That's, which is why that model has unfolded the way it has. The way we operate on a retainer basis, because that's what enables us to go after what you want.
Right.
If it's pure contingency, then we're not going to be able to devote the resources to finding exactly what you want. You want that commercial real estate lawyer in Los Angeles. Okay, in order for us to actually do that, to actually find that attorney that you want who fits that profile, we've got to put a researcher on it, we put a couple of recruiters on it, we put a client rep on it, and those, not to mention all the other resources that we have to do what we do. So that's we are paid retainers, which enables us to perform that function.
That's great. And what would you say your sweet spot is in terms of like law firm size or even industry? Do you guys specialize in industry, or is it?
Not really industry. Where we work all over the country, which we enjoy, and technology can be a fantastic thing. I mean, we could not really operate our business model as we do it. We couldn't have done it, 10 years ago, certainly not 15 years ago. The technology just wasn't good enough for us. But, now we can operate just as effectively in Seattle as we can in New York, as we can in Miami, as we can in LA. I mean, it really doesn't make a difference to us. But our sweet spot as far as clients, we call them right-sized clients, which we have some clients who are smaller. We do have some clients who are larger, but our sweet spot, a right-sized client, is a law firm that we've defined as between 100 and 500 lawyers, 2 or more offices, and an active growth mindset.
Nice.
Those are the 3 criteria, because we've just learned from experience that those firms are really where our model shines.
Oh yeah. I mean, they get it. They're focused on that. And it's such a beautiful and obvious fit. Yeah, that's great. Love it. All right. I got to tell you, Richard, this has been fantastic. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can get a copy of your book and where they can find out more about you and Onboard Legal?
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. So a couple of places, onboardlegal.com, my company's website is, of course, plenty of information there about us, about the team, what we do. I have a website that's primarily devoted to the book, richardbrock.com. And the book, Win the Talent Game, it is also available on Amazon. So if someone is interested, they go to Amazon, you type in, Win the Talent Game, it'll pop right up.
Fantastic. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on, Richard.
Matthew, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.